Welcome everybody to the Science of Dementia Prevention workshop. It's all about protecting your mind and taking action for a healthier brain. As a lot of you know, because you're here, the brain is so critical to quality of life. It is the lens through which we see the world. And it's really important to understand about the physical health of the brain and what we can do to keep it clear so we can stay mentally sharp and clear throughout our lives. So a lot of you know my personal story and why I'm up here giving this talk. My passion for brain health stems from this beautiful location here. This is Smith Rock, Oregon. In 2016, I had a rock climbing accident at this location, and I had a traumatic brain injury, and it flipped my life upside down. I went from being active and healthy and working a high-demand job to overnight being bedridden, couldn't work, I could barely sleep, I had mental health challenges, cognitive challenges, and I wasn't getting better. And after about 6 months of having very poor quality of life, I went and saw some of the top specialists in the US, had every possible test done, and the end of all that, they confirmed that I had post-concussive syndrome, which meant my brain wasn't healing and they didn't know why. And I said, okay, what can I do about that? And they said, well, you can wait to see if you get better on your own, or you can take pharmaceuticals for individual symptoms that you're experiencing, focus medication, sleep medication, anti-anxiety medication. I said, I know that I had this injury to my brain. It's causing all of these symptoms. So what do I need to do to help my brain recover? And so they didn't have any answers for me. Fortunately, my background is in biomedical engineering. I had studied quite a lot about the brain when I was in graduate school, and I knew we've been studying it in depth for over 80 years, and we are way beyond just sitting in a dark room and hoping to get better. And so I set out and read every scientific paper I could get my hands on that had to do with brain health, neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, neuroinflammation, and I started trying all of the things that I read about, and I was able to make a full recovery. And it was that journey that really showed me that there was and is a major disconnect between what is clinically studied and proven in the research world and what's actually practiced in medicine. And we've worked with a number of really phenomenal clinicians at this point, and we've learned from them that it takes about 20 years to translate research into medical practice, if it makes it. And frankly, people don't have 20 years. And so, based on my experience and this knowledge, I co-founded Mindeo. We believe that everyone should have access to the best brain health available and the tools that enable us to get that. So at Mindeo, we do these educational seminars, we do online courses, and we give people access to the latest technology that can actually improve the physical health of the brain and get people their quality of life that they deserve. The other part of this is access to information. There is so much that we know about the brain that just isn't out there in the general public and even in the medical world. And so I co-authored a best-selling book. It's the last 10 years of research into brain health and what we can actively do to improve it. So what we're going to cover in today's workshop, we're going to separate myths from reality. How do we actually keep the brain healthy as we age? We're going to talk about the biggest risk factors for cognitive decline and dementia. We're going to talk about the impact of nutrition, physical activity, and sleep on cognitive health and brain function. And by the end of this, my goal is for you to feel empowered with knowledge of what you can do today to stay on top of feeling mentally sharp and clear. Now, I want you to take a moment on your worksheet. Think about 2 things that you hope to learn or improve during today's session, and you can jot them down there. So We all have different motivations and priorities, so I'm curious, what comes to mind for you when you think about cognitive health? Does anyone want to share? What brings you here today? What interests you? Memory. Yep, that's a very common one.
Losing words.
Losing words.
That's a common one. Yes, that too.
Yeah.
My interest is just to combine those is actually learning techniques to get on top of that to where I can maintain and not lose.
Yes. Techniques for maintaining and keeping that mental sharpness and clarity. So we hear from a lot of people who come in here that this part of health and aging is important, but it's daunting. It can be really scary, and it's hard to focus on because of those things. So let's make it a little easier today together. Let's do some myth busting. So I'm going to put a myth on the screen, and then I want you to yell out true or false. So cognitive decline is a normal part of aging. I hear true, I hear some false. What do people at home think?
Based on something I read here, false.
Yeah. It is false. Decline is not inevitable, and lifestyle choices play a huge role in maintaining brain health. As Ron alluded to, we can be as sharp in our 90s as we are in our 30s. That is completely possible. You can't teach an old brain new tricks. False, I hear false, yep. Our brains are capable of learning and forming new pathways throughout life. If I start trying to learn a language when I'm 99 years old, my brain will rewire and support that learning. The brain is extremely resilient, and it has a property called neuroplasticity, where if you stimulate it in the right way, it will rewire to make that happen. Last myth, or true or false, there's nothing you can do to prevent dementia. Okay, well, you're probably all here because you know that that's false. There are many things you can do to reduce risk of dementia and keep mentally sharp. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things today. Researchers say up to 40% of dementia risk is potentially modifiable in adult life. People used to think that, and a lot of people still think that, some people get dementia and some people don't. You just don't know. You're just handed the bill of this is happening to you or this isn't. This is fantastic news. It gives us agency to do something about our brain health. We're all starting from somewhere unique. Today, every one of us has different life experiences. We have maybe different health challenges. We have different genetics, and all of those things contribute to our experience of brain health. If there's anything you take away from this workshop today, it should be that it doesn't take a miracle drug to change the game for you when it comes to brain health. Quite the opposite. So even education around risk factors can make a huge difference in dementia risk. There was this study that was conducted here in Washington State. It was about 200 people over the age of 70, and they all had at least 2 risk factors that were known risk factors for dementia. And so for half of them, they were in a control group. They got some general education about dementia risk. The intervention group, they got education around dementia risk, and they said, what do you want to work on? Of the risk factors, what is it that you want to focus on? And the person identified it, and then a coach just checked in with them once a month. At the end of a 2-year study period, the people who just got checked in on, just got educated and checked in on, reduced their dementia risk by 145%. Also, they had cognitive improvements by 74% and improved quality of life. So it doesn't take a lot. Even knowledge and intention can really change the game for your overall brain health. So there are three big areas that really affect your cognitive health. And so these big ideas on the next screen are going to make you a brain health expert. So the first one is that your brain stays strong based on demands. So just like this bicep here, just like you have to work a muscle, you have to work your brain. Things like puzzles, conversations, hobbies, new tasks, that creates cognitive demand and that keeps your brain healthy. The next big area is the physical health of the brain. Your brain needs oxygen, it needs nutrients, it needs blood flow, and it needs healthy levels of inflammation. Anyone who's met me before knows that knows a lot about inflammation and how important it is to keep it under control. The third big area is chronic health conditions. So what happens in the brain impacts the body and vice versa. So conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, those things do impact the physical health of the brain, and so it's really important to understand those risks and mitigate them where we can. And we'll talk more about this later in the workshop. So now, on your worksheet, take a moment, and as we go through this next section, jot down any risk factors that really resonate with you. So, what are my major cognitive risk areas? Now I'm going to give you a little PSA here. We're about to cover a lot of ground. That SMART trial that I talked about, that was just 9 risk factors that they looked at related to dementia risk. We're about to cover 24. This is the latest information as it comes to dementia risk, and every slide that I'm about to show you is just the tip of the iceberg. Each one on its own is a deep dive area, and I want to give you as much breadth of information as possible so you have an idea of what's involved when it comes to brain health and just how much agency you have. So hold on to your seats. Here we go. First big risk area is hearing loss. This might be a surprise to some people. Our brain is we talked about cognitive demand. We are extremely sensory creatures, especially hearing. We don't think about it, but even at this moment, my brain is hearing feet sliding, cars going outside, the hum of the HVAC, all these things, and it's filtering it out so that I can be present and talk to you. But the brain is doing all of that work. So when we suddenly have a loss of stimulation, if I suddenly have hearing loss and it cuts it in half, I'm reducing my cognitive demands by a significant amount, and less stimulation means higher risk for dementia. Untreated hearing loss increases risk of dementia by 2.4 times. The good news is, when we treat that hearing loss, we take that risk way back down to 0. So the takeaway here is it's important to get your hearing checked regularly to make sure that this preventable risk is mitigated. Again, we're sensory creatures. So vision loss, as we start to lose our vision, we lose sensory input. Vision loss is associated with a 47% higher risk of dementia due to less stimulation. So again, get your eyes checked, get it corrected, and you mitigate that risk. So when you're all sharing all the things related to cognitive health, something I didn't hear was mental health. Mental health is directly tied to the physical health of the brain. Untreated depression doubles the risk of dementia. Depression in midlife increases dementia risk in later life. Why? Social isolation, increased cortisol levels, increased inflammation levels, all of those things are hard on the brain. And so, just like with the last two things, if you treat it, you reduce that risk way down. Hypertension. So hypertension or high blood pressure increases the risk of dementia. So the goal is to have 120 systolic or lower. It's okay to be up to 130 if you're older, And I want to note that these are at-home readings. So when we're out and about, maybe we're at the doctor's office, maybe we're at a Walgreens, just inherently being outside of our home is a more stressful condition, so our readings are going to be a little bit higher. And so these are at-home measures. LDL cholesterol. So high, low LDL also increase risk of stroke, increased amyloid and tau proteins that are associated with Alzheimer's. The goal is to have LDL 100 milligrams per deciliter or lower. What you'll see in most doctors' offices and blood panels is that the standard is 150 to 160. The brain needs your levels to be lower. And so that's what you want to shoot for. Diabetes. Diabetes causes blood vessel damage. Insulin resistance leads to inflammation in the brain. So essentially what happens both with high blood pressure, with high levels of cholesterol, LDL, and diabetes is that the blood vessels in the brain get small and stiff. And it can lead to buildup of cholesterol in those blood vessels, which impacts blood flow. We talked about that major area, that physical health of the brain needs blood flow and nutrients. If we're cutting off blood flow, we're not getting the brain what it needs, and that leads to damage in the brain. And so it's really important to work with a physician in order to treat diabetes to the best of your ability. Bone health. So osteoporosis increases dementia risk by 20% in women and 30% in men. You can limit this risk by doing load-bearing activities. We talked about how the brain needs load, the muscles need load, the bones also need load. So that just means like maybe lifting things regularly, even like lifting packages at home. Anything that's going to put some weight on your bones is going to help keep that density high. And something you can do proactively is get bone density scans in order to track that and catch it if it starts to become an issue. Stress. Stress isn't just an emotion. It is a physiologic reaction. When we get stressed, if someone busts in the door right now and I get a stress response, what happens is my heart rate jumps up, my cortisol levels jump up, adrenaline jumps up, and inflammation jumps up. That's okay temporarily, but when we're experiencing chronic stress, which means we're getting that heightened response over and over again, we're putting the body out of balance, and we're putting the system into a state of chronic inflammation. That kind of state, chronic stress, is associated with an extremely high risk of Alzheimer's. So there are techniques, this is another thing that you can mitigate. There are a lot of techniques that have been shown to improve the stress response in the body and help get us from that fight or flight into that rest and recharge, or rest and relax, rest and digest. One of the techniques is box breathing. It's also meditation. Exercise helps with stress resilience. We have a whole chapter in the book for alternative and complementary practices, all of which reduce neuroinflammation and improve our stress resilience. Yes, good question. That is a question I get every time I give this talk. So box breathing is a technique where you inhale for 4, you hold your breath for 4, you exhale for 4 counts, and then you hold your breath for 4 counts. And so we might as well all do it together. And so everyone breathe out. Now we're going to breathe in for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3, 4. You have made a box. You do that.
I've done that. I didn't know that's.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you do that a few times, you'll notice stress start to dissipate, because that kind of breathing pattern tells your nervous system you're safe, and it calms the stress response.
Sleep. When I first lay down.
Yes, several people find it helpful for sleep. We'll point this out for everyone at home. 2.45, I wanted to make sure to say that, write this down. 2.45 times risk is one of the highest risk factors of all of the risk factors that we talk about in this presentation, and it is something within your control. So that's a big thing to take away. TBIs and concussions. So traumatic brain injuries increase risk of dementia by 66%. Even mild concussions, like maybe a small whiplash during a car accident, mild symptoms, it has an effect on the brain. Generally, if you see stars, you see dizziness, you have any change, you feel nauseous, any change to cognition after something that has to do with your brain, it is more than likely that you have a concussion. And so take it seriously and do what you can to reduce that neuroinflammation. So even though this risk itself is not mitigatable after it happens, all of the other things that you can do can offset the risk associated with a previous TBI. Adult ADHD. This is a really massive risk factor. So adult ADHD has an association with 2.77 times increase risk of dementia. So that's almost 3 times increased risk. The reason it's such a high risk is because often ADHD correlates with other risk factors in life, such as poor sleep, poor diet, poor lifestyle. Again, there's a silver lining to all of this. What happens if you treat it? The risk goes away. Yeah, exactly. So, really important to understand what's going on in your brain and body. Talk to a physician if you think that this might apply to you, and get it treated. The next risk factor, and this is one that people often ask about, is my mother had Alzheimer's or my grandmother had Alzheimer's. Am I going to get Alzheimer's? There is a genetic component for some people when it comes to Alzheimer's. So the APOE4 gene, if you get 1 copy, so from one of your parents, it can increase your risk by 2 to 3 times. If you get 2 copies, so one from both parents, it increases risk by 8 to 12 times, which is very high. But again, it's not a certainty. Increases risk factors, but all of these mitigation strategies and improving the physical health of the brain reduces that risk down. One other thing I'll note when it comes to genetic testing, people often ask me, should I get tested for this gene? And my perspective is that if it's going to change what you do, like there are some people who are really proactive. They're like, I'm going to try and be as healthy as I can just in case. And there's some people who say, well, I'm not going to be proactive, I'm not going to make any changes unless I know that I have an extremely high risk of something. That'll be the switch that flips. So if you're a proactive person, then it may just be an added stress. You don't want to contribute to the chronic stress risk just by knowing that information. But if it's going to help you make some decisions to really take action when it comes to your brain health, then go for it. All right, so good work getting through all of those initial risks. There's more, but now we're going to talk more about specific actions you can take, especially as it comes to daily life choices. So cognitive stimulation. Who here's played a Sudoku? Yes, a lot of number puzzlers here. Cognitively challenging activities like Sudoku, like puzzles, word searches, Tetris, Mahjong, yes, it's good. It creates the cognitive demand to keep your brain working. It also creates a protein called brain-derived neurotropic factor. So this protein is fundamental for brain health. What it does, it's a nerve-stimulating protein, which means when it's present, it allows your neurons to be healthy and to form new connections. It's fundamental for neuroplasticity. And so you only get it really doing 2 things: cognitive demanding tasks and exercise. You need it. Exercise. Yep. You need it for learning and memory formation. So when you learn a new task, you need BDNF in your brain in order to solidify it there. Social life. So social isolation is associated with a 50% increased risk of dementia. It's associated with other risk factors such as hypertension, stress, heart disease, depression, all of which can negatively impact brain health. We are social creatures, we are tribal, we rely on each other to survive, and so when we don't have that natural coherence and that connection to other people, it physiologically impacts us. So if you know someone who maybe isn't getting social interaction, especially when they might be experiencing some cognitive decline, I often hear from people once they're experiencing word loss or like word recall issues, it's more difficult to socialize and get out there, but that is especially important that they feel supported and do that. Activity. So physical activity. There's books written on this. It increases brain volume, improves blood flow and function, reduces blood pressure, increases nitric oxide, increases neuroplasticity, all of which help you be mentally flexible and adaptable, and decrease neuroinflammation. And increase BDNF. We talked about that before. This is the single most important factor when it comes to that second category of the physical health of the brain. You need to be moving in order to get blood flow up to your brain. The other critical one, sleep. Koalas sleep. Well, you're from Australia. How much do koalas sleep? 20 hours a day. We don't need that many hours. We need 7 to 9 hours.
So that's the family I belong to.
Everyone at home, Gary is a koala. So quantity and quality matter. As I mentioned, we need 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. That means you may or may not be familiar, but we have different parts of our sleep. We have deep restorative sleep in the first half of the night. That's critical for clearing out everything that your brain's been doing. Like your brain is constantly working. It's just firing like crazy just listening to me talk. And when you deep sleep, that's when you clear out all the byproducts from all the work that it's doing right now. And the second half of the sleep is when you have, second half of the night is when you have REM sleep. And that sleep is fundamental for learning, memory consolidation, really locking in the memories from this conversation are going to happen tomorrow morning for you. And that's when it's going to lock into your mind. And so sleep apnea, people sometimes come in, they say, I don't sleep well. My partner says that I snore and that I sometimes stop breathing. Is that a problem? The answer is yes. Our brain needs oxygen. Our whole being, every cell in our body needs oxygen and needs nutrients. The brain needs a lot more. The brain is like a supercomputer. It's working so hard right now. It uses 10 times the oxygen supply of the rest of the body. And so if you suspect you might have sleep apnea, get it checked out. Because our brains need oxygen while we're sleeping, so it can do all of the things I just described. Clearing out, resetting, restoring, consolidating memories, and getting us ready for the next day. Sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene, it helps increase sleep quality and duration. Anyone familiar with this term, sleep hygiene? Yeah, okay. So sleep hygiene just means like, what are the specific things we can do to get our brains and our bodies ready to go to sleep? If we were living outside, we would naturally be, and actually a lot of farmers, naturally go with the sun. Like as the sun is setting, you're getting all the signals that it's time to go down for sleep. In this society where we're around bright lights and we're up at night and we're getting these mixed signals, it's confusing for the brain. And so there are ways that we can recalibrate in order to get a good night's sleep. Some of those strategies, I think I have them. Nope. I'll just tell you a couple of the quick strategies real quick. Trying to go to bed at the same time every night. We are circadian creatures, so we're on a 24-hour cycle. And so if I get into bed and get into a state of going to sleep at 10 p.m. every night, then my wiring and my brain will prepare to have deep sleep for the first 4 hours of the night, and then REM sleep for the second 4 hours with light sleep in there as well. If I am going to bed at 10 every night and then I suddenly go to bed at 1, I've cut off 3 hours of my potential deep sleep. That's how important circadian rhythm is. So one of the best techniques you can do is going to bed at the same time every night, and don't look at your phones within 2 hours of going to sleep. Don't look at screens, because that bright light is sending a signal to your brain to wake up instead of go to sleep. All right, food and drink. So I've said several times now, food and oxygen, necessary for every cell in your body, including every neuron. The type of nutrients and food you put in your body impacts how your brain responds. So let's talk about some risk factors and some things that are good for your brain. Processed meats, not so good for your brain. Even 1 ounce a day, that's like 4 pieces of salami. And I'm not saying that from personal experience, but I love salami. Increases risk by 44%. Hot dogs, bacon.
That cannot be true for bacon. Please.
Let the record show that Ron refuses to believe bacon is bad for you. Bologna, sausage, all processed meats, rough on the body, rough on the brain. It's okay to do. Just eat mindfully. Be aware of the risk associated with and spread it out. Eat some unprocessed meat, which has a mild risk reduction effect, and then eat a couple pieces of salami or bacon. Also, eating fish, specifically cold water fish, that are high in omega-3s has a higher positive effect, and we'll talk about omega-3s a little bit later in this presentation. Processed foods in general, the salt, sugar, unhealthy fats, all accelerate challenges with blood pressure, diabetes, inflammation, body and brain, cognitive health. So the goal is to reduce packaged, takeout, and processed foods. Again, you don't need to do this overnight. Just take a couple of the chip packets out and some blueberries and zucchinis in. Small steps make a big difference. Now let's talk a bit about some of the big categories. So sugar. High sugar intake is associated with 180% higher risk of dementia. Often the next question I get is, how much is high sugar? Well, to get into this risk category, it's eating like a slice of cake every day. Slice of cake with frosting on it. It's about 70 to 80 grams of sugar a day. Or was that 2.5 Cokes? That puts you in the high risk category when it comes to sugar. So there's lots of things that you can do to curb that. Cut the cake in half. Reduce that risk. Salt also can be really tough on the brain. What happens when we eat salt, like what happens at a blood vessel level, is that when we ingest salt, we get a temporary hardening of the blood vessels. It's okay because it loosens up and it's just like with stress, like we get a temporary constriction, opens up, we're in business. You eat a bit of salt, you get a hardening of the blood vessels, and then they loosen back up. But if you're constantly eating high levels of salt, your blood vessels, everything in your body, were meant to be fluid and adaptable. As soon as something gets rigid, it makes it so that blood flow gets more difficult. You're more likely to get clogging, especially if you have like higher LDL levels. It just increases risk overall, and increased risk that have to do with blood pressure and cholesterol increases dementia risk by a lot. 330%. More than 12 grams a day. Healthy amount of salt intake, because we do need ions and electrolytes, is about 4 grams a day. That's how much salt. As a comparative, 1 packet of ramen in the store is probably 6 grams. But that's packaged. So if you're going to eat ramen, try and make it fresh. Okay, and now a good area. So caffeine. We have a win. Caffeine is actually good for the brain.
Research I like.
Caffeine, this is about 1 to 2 normal size cups of coffee. We're not talking massive mugs, Ron. Decreases risk of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, strokes, and depression. And if you're not a coffee person, you can get caffeine in other forms. I drink green tea-based matcha, for example. There's L-theanine in it, which is also an antioxidant, and it's good for the brain. Ideal foods. So we talked about a lot of the things that come with risk. What are the things that we should be trying to prioritize more of when we go to the grocery store? Whole carbs like quinoa, oats, legumes, anything in the produce section. Healthy fats, so unsaturated fats like avocados, seeds, nuts, extra virgin olive oil, fatty fish, nut butters, chia, and flax. Also protein. Underconsumption of protein is a risk factor. So the newest research in this area shows that we should be eating about 1.5 grams per kilogram of protein every day. What that means for someone who's about 150 pounds is 100 grams of protein a day. And that's to maintain good overall health, muscle mass, brain mass and health, and everything in between. Also, fiber helps with blood sugar management, and studies show a correlation between high fiber, 20 grams or more a day, and lower dementia risk over a 20-year period. All right, for those of you casual wine drinkers, alcohol does increase risk of dementia. So in midlife, if someone's drinking about 12 drinks per week in the US, that's, a couple glasses of wine a night, even light to moderate drinking still has a higher risk than no drinking. So if you're a big cocktail person, maybe try cutting the cocktail with kombucha or soda water, and you still have a delicious cocktail, but you reduce the risk that's associated with the alcohol, because alcohol is hard on the brain. Smoking. So current smokers have a 30% increased risk of all-cause dementia and a 79% increased risk of Alzheimer's. There's actually a 32-year-long study that found that people who quit smoking and had quit at least 10 years prior actually completely reduced their risk of dementia back down to 0. That was associated with smoking. So it's never too late to make positive lifestyle changes. Air quality. So inner city industrial and commercial pollution can be damaging. Urban pollution can increase dementia risk up to 17%. And indoor air, mold, fumes from hobbies like woodworking, renovations, painting, things like that, are also essentially anything that gets into the body that's not meant to be there, that's going to cause an immune reaction, is going to increase inflammation, and inflammation increases dementia and Alzheimer's risk. Teeth and gums. So though it might seem minor, gum or tooth infections can be a really big problem. Bacteria, the fact is, our gums are really close to our brain, and there's bacteria that specifically that can live in the gums that release enzymes that destroy nerve cells in the brain. And there's a link between that and causing 95% risk or worsening of Alzheimer's. So if you have any kind of gum infection, get it taken care of right away. There's no point in letting it sit and increase risk. Medication. So the benzo group of medications, that's Xanax, Valium, like muscle relaxants, Klonopin, things like that, can increase the risk, with long-term use, increase the risk of dementia by 50%. They can also cause short-term cognitive impairment. So, sometimes if you take a Xanax, cognition... Oh, yes, Gary, question.
What SSRIs in general?
You were shaking your head no. What is...
This is not a demonstrated association with this.
Oh, that's why you're shaking it. There is not a demonstrated association of dementia risk with the use of SSRIs. Yeah. Just specifically benzos.
Could you say that? What are the benzo groups?
Yes, you mean what are examples of it?
Yeah.
Xanax, Valium, Klonopin, Librium, things like that. Lorazepam. We have a physician here. Yeah, those are all examples of benzos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Omega-3s. Omega-3s hugely affect the cellular health of the brain. So every cell in our body has fatty acids that make up the cell membranes. In our brain, that composition is different than the rest of our body. It's a much higher ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. So in the rest of the body, it's 6-to-1, and in the brain, it's a 3-to-1. Our neurons get composed of whatever we're eating. And so the average American diet is 20-to-1. For comparison, omega-6s are pro-inflammatory, omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. If we're not getting a 3-to-1 ratio in the neurons in our brain, and we have some kind of stress event, maybe an illness, maybe an injury, if those neurons get damaged and it has more pro-inflammatory fatty acids in there, is it going to be harder or easier to recover from that injury or illness?
Like salmon.
Yes, the question is, does the dietary source of the omega-3s matter? Salmon versus supplementation? All that matters is that you get the omega-3s in. A lot of people can't eat salmon every day and kind of get that into their diet that way. And so in that case, supplementing is a really good idea. It's really important to find high-quality supplements that are third-party tested to make sure that it's that it's high quality and that it's bioavailable and actually being taken up by the body in the right way. You're welcome. So long-term use can reduce Alzheimer's disease risk by up to 64%. And because we talk about inflammation a lot here, it reduces risk in other ways as well, because reducing inflammation systemically improves the physical health of the brain, and the physical health of the brain reduces risk for neurodegeneration. So we're going to take a moment, look on your worksheet. What's one area of your lifestyle that you'd like to improve to support your brain health? The next step is to put some of this into action. Little things you do today can start improving your brain health long term. So think about one or two areas that you've identified as interesting and relevant to you, and then think about how to start actioning that. So identify one specific action you can take in the next week to support your cognitive well-being. So just to put it here as you do your worksheets, this is kind of the snapshot of the big categories that we talked about. So in the cognitive demand, we're talking hearing loss, vision loss, cognitive stimulation, social life. Maybe you want to do something in this category. In the physical health of the brain category, there's all of these things that we talked about. And then when it comes to taking care of our whole body and potential chronic issues. Those are things that you can work on with your provider, or you can do on your own, like stress management. Lastly, I want to show you a really fantastic tool. So I know a lot of science, but I don't know everything that's in the public domain because there are billions of papers. There's this nifty tool that now exists called perplexity.ai, and you can ask it scientific questions, and it will cite peer-reviewed, so evidence-based sources. So you can ask it any question, and then add this at the end. Only referenced peer-reviewed research, and then it'll give you an answer. Like if I ask, tell me about how stress affects dementia risk and what I can do about it. So it'll answer it, and then it will give specific studies to support its answer, and it'll cite it. So if you want to dive a bit deeper into the scientific paper, you can just click on it and get that information. So we've covered a lot of ground today. The first thing is how to keep the brain healthy as we age. We busted some myths. Then we talked about the biggest risk factors for cognitive decline and dementia. We talked about the impact of lifestyle choices like nutrition, physical activity, and sleep. And we talked about some things that you can do today to improve your cognitive health and feel mentally sharp and clear and